Good morning, Facebook people, all my friends. Happy Monday, and welcome to chapter 22. For a variety of reasons I won't get into right now, I wasn't able to put out 2 videos last week, just got the one. So, kind of a cliffhanger episode on top of that. So sorry about that. Some things came up that I couldn't change, so here we are. And I am going live this morning. And here we are. It's very rainy outside, and I'm kind of loving it, actually. So we're in chapter 22. In our last chapter, as you know, it was there was a lot going on there. If you haven't seen this one, go back and watch chapter 21. It'll make a lot more sense. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Chapter 22, and we will be hearing chapter 23 on Thursday. So obviously what I shared in the last chapter was not easy. Again, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. You're going to immediately see why that wasn't so easy to share. And, obviously I was really ashamed of what I did. And, of course. But it wasn't just hard because of the guilt that I felt. There was more to it than that. It was, again, because I had learned that I was actually one person, not two Darrens. So up until that point in my life, I had, honest to goodness, really been two separate Darrens, and I can attest to that. So many people attest to that. And when I cheated on my ex, at the time boyfriend, those two worlds merged. Those two Darrens that had been separate and apart, they came right together, right? But here was the kind of the fun part. The one Darren, after the merger, the one Darren that's there now, he was here to stay. And so, just jumping ahead a little bit, that's pretty good, right? We go through things in our lives that we just can't even imagine why we're going through at the time, and then later we're like, oh. Okay, so let's get back into that moment when it all happened, what I was feeling going through. So you'll remember that my amazing therapist at the time, Dr. Kaufman, he sent me this email, and it said that I needed to pray to myself. Again, if that doesn't make sense, you definitely have to go back and watch chapter 21. And the second suggestion I was given, it was kind of homework really, was to watch The Power of Vulnerability by Dr. Brené Brown. It's a TED Talk, right? I've mentioned it 100 times, I think, so far in this story. So that was what I was supposed to do. So that's what I did, right? It was as if every time I watched that video, because I just kept going back and watching it. I legit probably watched that video 12 times in like a 2-week time span. It was pretty crazy. And every time I watched it, I learned something new. My eyes saw something new. My ears heard something new. It was just crazy. So the power of vulnerability, right? Based on research, those who live the happiest lives, the most fulfilled lives, are the ones who are the most vulnerable. Okay, they got that. Her research also says that when we try to selectively numb something, we end up numbing everything. You can't selectively numb. Okay, yep, got that. And what we really want is connection. This is neurobiologically wired into our brains, right? We want connection. And in order to really feel that true, deeply rooted, you get me connection, we have to let ourselves be seen. Truly be seen. Okay, yep, I got that too. So it occurred to me that obviously Dr. Kaufman hadn't sent this to me for it to just be viewed over and over and over, watch this on repeat. It was clearly my homework. There was some homework really embedded in there. And I know that if he had given me sort of a checklist or bullet points, here's what you need to do, I don't think that would have worked, right? He knew me pretty well. So, if you know me at all, you'll know that I wear my heart on my sleeve. And you can basically just tell everything that's happening in my heart and in my head and my mind and my soul just by looking at my face, right? It's a total map. So the weeks after my little incident, people around me are definitely noticing that something is up. Something is definitely bugging Darren. I was not myself. And I remember that the day finally came when I took this idea of the power of vulnerability, been watching it over and over on repeat, and I actually did something with it. That video came into my life. The first person that I really told that I had cheated on my, at the time, boyfriend was my brother. I told my brother what had happened, and then I told him why. This is why it happened. The why being that I had tried to stuff down and numb, everything that was truly hurting me. And instead of dealing with those things, I was just showing up the way that I thought everyone wanted me to show up, being the opposite of authentic, being totally fake, really. And I just thought that all those things I was stuffing down, they were just going to go away, right? Which obviously led to some very regrettable choices. So my brother is not the biggest feeler in the world. I mean, he's a wonderful, compassionate guy, don't get me wrong, but he does not wear his heart on his sleeve like his big little brother. But he did listen. He listened completely and fully, and he heard me, and I felt both seen and loved because of it. And it was a damn good feeling. I'll never forget that. It was almost like showing someone a scar or something. Like you're really embarrassed about it, and you just think your whole life that if someone sees the scar, they're going to be like, oh, wow, oh, what? Well, he saw it, and we talked about it, and I was seen and heard and loved. That was like this little fire that was lit in me. So, a few of my friends, my close friends and slash classmates, they were the next to sort of hear from me. Because again, you can tell something's up with Darren. So I start telling some of my really close friends what happened and what led up to it, and really getting very clear, being very vulnerable with these people. And really sharing, I can't miss this, that there were two Darrens, but now there's only one. Sorry guys, there's only one Darren now. And I know right now it seems so insignificant and like, really? That was a big deal? But at the time it was a huge deal, you guys. Like, this was a big deal to start admitting this kind of stuff to the people in my life and getting very clear, very real, very authentic with them. So, and I wasn't going up on the rooftop with a loudspeaker telling everyone in the world what needed to be said, or like whatever. It wasn't like that. I was just telling people in my life the actual parts of me that I wanted to share. I was actually showing up, actually letting myself being seen. Okay, so now I know I'm leaving a ton of details out here, but the change that occurred in my life from those few weeks was dramatic in a good way and very, very real as well. It was just like things started happening, things started clicking, all this talk about being vulnerable. Well, I was seeing the results of this. So I really started applying this idea of the power of vulnerability to many parts of my life. People, situations, ideas. I just started showing up instead of kind of showing up inauthentically as the shell that I had been showing up as. I just started doing that. And I don't even think I did it intentionally at first, but it definitely started happening. This newfound idea that I could just tell people what was actually in my heart and was actually on my mind and actually happening in my life, instead of going into the, oh, I'm good bullshit and not getting real with people, that led to the biggest gift of my life. That was freedom. Total freedom. Not only did I start being vulnerable with those around me and the situations in my life and whatnot, I really started being vulnerable with myself and with God. I started asking questions I had always been scared to even say out loud. I wasn't even asking them to like a person, just to God in general. My view of God definitely needed to change. And instead of addressing that and shoving it down, I started showing up, started asking questions to myself. It's amazing what happens whether you're extroverted or introverted when you just kind of talk to yourself. Does anyone know that feeling? Like when you actually say something out loud. I am such an extrovert that I actually know of myself now that I need to talk out loud sometimes. I'll just kind of be like, okay, Darren, stop, get out of your head. Well, that's what I started to do. I started being really vulnerable. I shared the hurt. I shared the pain. I shared the resistance. I shared the questions that I had that I'd always been too scared to ask. I shared the anxiety I was going through. I shared the nervousness. I shared the blank, you name it. I just finally started sharing what was actually going on in my life. And you name it, I shared it. And it was vulnerable. It was hard a lot of times. And again, not with a megaphone to the whole world, but to those around me. You know, I just started showing up as myself. And an unexpected result began to surface. This was, now the power of vulnerability. When I hear that, I don't know how it lands with you. It may imply that there's like one result or one benefit of the power of vulnerability. Well, I'm telling you, there are dozens. There's dozens and dozens of benefits of using vulnerability in your life and showing up authentically, right? So here was an unexpected result that occurred in mine. It turns out that there were some people, many in fact, that didn't really like what I had to share. They didn't really like me being vulnerable and showing up authentically. But for the first time in my entire life, their dislike for who I was or what I had to say, it did not occur to me as rejection. This was profound. Instead, it occurred to me as this chance to move on. Why? Because there was closure. I didn't have to guess or wonder what anyone thought of me anymore. When I showed up as vulnerable to somebody and they liked it or didn't like it, I knew. I knew in that moment. No more guessing, no more wondering, no more little gerbil wheel going on in my head. You can get really clear when you're vulnerable with people. So that is one of my favorite effects of the power of vulnerability. Just that when utilized, it gives you an instant answer. Like you're no longer just in your head. I mean, obviously we get in our heads still, but those questions that you spend way too much time pondering over and over and over and over, get vulnerable, show up as your authentic self, get it out, and you get an answer. It's fascinating. There's closure, and now you know. So this is an actual exchange that happened with a person from my senior class who I was really close to. I thought that they were a dear friend at the time. Turns out you can't assume anything because, again, going back to that gerbil wheel in your head, you're just assuming all kinds of shit. Like, oh, they think this way about me, or oh, what if I didn't do this? Well, when you get vulnerable and you actually show up as your authentic self, you know there's closure. So this girl, I wondered why. So she was one of the people that I ended up telling, yeah, I cheated on my at the time boyfriend, and things weren't good, but here's kind of why, and I'm in this space, and so I'm being vulnerable, right? And she really sort of started, she just shut down, was very dismissive, became super short with me. And in that exchange, like at the end of this conversation, I could feel it. I was like, this is kind of weird, right? And I know I had two options. I could have just been like, thank you for listening and walked away and ignored it. Or I could be vulnerable. I remember asking this girl like very directly, hey, like, why are you being so short with me? I shared my heart with you, and it just feels like you're not taking it very well. It's like, can you tell me what's going on? And she said, well, I think that you're a cheater. And I don't I don't really have anything to do with those kinds of people in my life. And I remember saying, like, okay, so even though I was vulnerable with you and I'm working on things, like that's not gonna work, and you see me as a cheater. And she was like, yep. And that was legit the last conversation I had with her. I remember saying, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Again, I can't thank Brene Brown enough to the nth degree for empowering me with this skill. Because again, before I'd learned about the power of vulnerability, I would have took that as total rejection. She is rejecting me. She doesn't like me. She doesn't think, like whatever. On a totally separate like path, that's not what vulnerability is. I simply knew that I was vulnerable with that person. She didn't really accept me, and that's okay. Now I know. And I felt relieved to know that I couldn't be the real me with her. So it's like, if I don't fit into her expectations, I'm just not going to have her as a friend in my life. And it was kind of as simple as that. I started kind of cleaning house with this mindset. Those that didn't just, well, I'll tell you this, true friends and people that love us in our lives, they love us through the great times and the tough times. Can I get an amen? When you show up vulnerably, with vulnerability, and you have the courage to share what's going on in your life, the true friends of ours, our true loved ones, they love us through the thick and the thin. They just do. And why would we want people in our lives that don't love us through the thin? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's kind of surface level, right? So the power of vulnerability, again, a lot of details missing out. It started just changing my life. In a matter of months, I became a completely different person. If you look at a picture of me, even physically, you can see this difference of me opening up and becoming the authentic me. And even though I'm not sure I knew who the real me was, I was finally asking questions out loud, and I was finally showing up with the vulnerability to say, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am, right? Almost every relationship in my life that kind of survived that 3-week tirade, they just became instantly real, beautiful, authentic friendships that have lasted to this day. The real Darren, I just decided I'm not going to be fake anymore. I'm going to tell the truth. And I'm not going to be like I'm not going to get on soapboxes and just share my opinion all the time. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just going to show up as the authentic me. And when the opportunity presents itself, I'm just really going to be real. I think the biggest thing that happened in that time frame is that shell I've brought up a couple of times in this story, that empty shell, it was finally gone, you guys. It was gone. I was no longer filling myself up with the expectations of other people. Now, I am not in any way saying that I have mastered the power of vulnerability and I have it all figured out and every relationship in my life is authentic and perfect. Like, no, please don't assume that. I'm still learning every single day. But I can tell you that when those two worlds collided and forced me to get real, I was more or less forced to learn the power of vulnerability. It gave me my life back. And I learned how to use it. I learned how to implement it. And I learned why. I learned why it's good to be vulnerable. And that's really where it began. I can honestly say that I believe my life started over kind of then, if that makes any sense. And it is to this day, it turns out, why I'm still here. The power of vulnerability is truly both life-changing and life-saving. And I think it's because vulnerability leads somewhat to a reset. And in a way, for me, the best thing about a reset is that it means you can start over and try again. And that's exactly what I did. So thank you for listening today, you guys. That is chapter 22, the vulnerability. I'll give you a hint. Next week's chapter is called The Reset. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate y'all so much. A lot of stuff happened last week, just kind of crazy stuff. I can't share it yet right now. Maybe when the time is right, I will. Be vulnerable. If you don't know the life-changing work of Brené Brown, there are so many ways for you to go learn about who she is, what she does, and how she is changing the world truly. Her message changes people. It changed me. She has several books out. She has a Netflix special right now on Netflix. It's like an hour-long special. Her TED Talk is, as far as I know, it's either the first or second most viewed TED Talk in the world. You can just Google her. It's B-R-E-N-E, Brené Brown. She's hilarious, lovely, wonderful. I hope I can meet her one day and just say thank you. I know it was vulnerable for her to learn about vulnerability. I know that. And just like, what an example. What an example. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to go enjoy my rainy Monday. I'd love to hear from you. Share my video. And I will see you on Thursday. Bye, you guys.